Alright, we're going to do a character design today in Photoshop. This is just going to be a front, side, and three-quarter. Hopefully we'll get to all of it. I'm going to try and make this one a little bit short. We're going to design a character that I've been working on for a little while, and again we're going to be in Photoshop here. So first thing I'm going to do in Photoshop is I'm going to give myself a layer. Right? I don't want to be drawn on that background. That is problematic. It allows you to color a little bit better and separate your layers a little bit more. So the first layer I'm going to do is as a ground plane, and I've got my brush tool. I'm kind of on all the default settings. I do have my pressure sensitivity enabled here, so I can go from a thin line up into a thicker line like that. Photoshop allows you to do kind of funky things like that. Again, I've got a layer above my background. I'm just going to lay in kind of a ground plane here, just so I know kind of the surface I'm dealing with. Okay, that's a nice little ground plane. One thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put my opacity down like this because I want it to be a little bit lighter than what I'm drawing on top, so it's not really distracting. And then I also want to lock that layer. And if I'm going to be all fancy like, I'm going to want to label this ground. I'm going to put another layer in there, my little layer tab here. So now I've got a layer on the top. This is going to be my rough layer. So in that layer, I'm going to take a look at my brush. I can just go up into here. I can grab whatever brushes I want. I can get the hardness up here is at 100%. That's what I like. Size, I can always manipulate that later. I can also go into here, and I can choose different kind of brushes and brush tip shape and all that kind of stuff. We're just gonna, because this is a rough, we're just gonna stick with the default. I like to use my brackets up in the upper right hand corner, so that the right hand bracket will give you a little bit bigger of a brush. So this is how I manipulate my brush size. So we're going to go back and forth between the brush probably and the eraser tool. The hotkey for the eraser tool is E. You'll see how it goes down there. So if I'm on B as my brush, if I go here and I hit E, I'm going to go back to my eraser. Right? If I go back to B and I draw a line and I hold down E, I can erase. And then when I depress the E key, I go back to my brush. And I can also go Apple Z like that. So that's what we're going to start with. I don't want to start necessarily with black. I'm just going to go up here and get a little bit of a gray here. I don't necessarily like the look of the real black brush tool for my roughs. So I'm just going to kind of concept out here a little guy. I've worked with this guy before. He's just kind of a nice little character. I've got a little story that I've got kind of planned with him. That I want to kind of delve into, so that's why I'm kind of doing this tutorial, so I can kind of flush him out a little bit more. He's a little guy, right? So you can see I'm just building in those basic shapes right now. I'm not getting too fancy at this point. I'm thinking a little bit about the flower sack of his body here, his legs. I might want to, again, hotkey E. I'm going to bring that up a little bit. I'm going to go here, thinking about, okay, there's his knee cut off. It looks like this. Boom, there's his foot. And if I'm thinking a little bit about perspective, his foot's going to come down a little bit. So he's got his arm right here. And I've got, I mean, there's some different schools of thought on this. If you're doing it in 3D, you're going to want to do a T-pose, like with the arms out like this. I'm not necessarily designing for 3D, so I'm just going to do kind of a loose pose. What I could do is I could take his arms and I could bring them a little bit out like this, right? So I've got a little bit of breathing room in here between his arms and his body, just so I can see how all that fits together. Right, it's kind of nice to be able to see all the individual pieces. I'm kind of liking the upper body here. His lower body is a little wonky. I might kind of come out a little bit. I'm going to round him a little bit there. Maybe not so much. Okay, I'm liking the size of his head. I might bring the sides in slightly. He's looking a little bit top heavy there, and he's a little bit square. Okay, I'm kind of liking him there. I'm going to extend this line down just to make sure that my measurements are correct. He's going to have a part in his hair there. So that's one side of his hair. There's the other side. Okay, so now I've got kind of the midline. I'm going to locate everything kind of below the midline here. And I've got kind of 3 equal circles here is what I'm thinking of for his eyes, his nose, wonk wonk, and I can't decide whether or not to give him a mustache. Oh, I kind of like the little mustache there. He's got a little mustachio there. So then what I've got is I've got basically a straight line across his eyes here, his ears, nose, all that kind of junk, right? I'm going to kind of bring him back like that. I could decide to get a little part there if I want. Kind of like that. I don't know if I like that. We'll see. I might bring his hair out slightly like this. Right? Okay. And so he's going to be kind of a little business dude. So I'm going to give him just really quickly. I'm already at like 5 or 6 minutes. I'm going to try and keep these short. So there's his suit jacket. He's got his little lapel-y thing kind of like right there. I'm going to have his little hand here. I'm going to do a little bit more work on the hands and stuff like that a little bit later. So that's his rough front, right? So I'm going to go back to my ground layer. Actually, I'll do another layer right here. These are going to be my ref lines. That's reference lines. And for that, I'm going to choose a little bit of a red just so I can differentiate it. Now, I'm doing this by hand. You could certainly do this with a ruler or some tools in Photoshop. I'm just going to keep it nice and simple. So I've delineated the top of his head. This is kind of the bottom of his head, and this is his eye line here. Maybe this is the bottom of his hair. This is his waist and his bottom of his wrist. And this is his knee, sort of, right? So I'm going to take that opacity down a little bit. So these are just kind of rough guidelines, right? I'm going to go there. I'm going to lock that. I'm going to go back to my rough, and then I can hold down my option and select that color again. So I just held down the option and I selected my gray again. So now I'm going to do the side. So this right here, obviously, is the front. The next step in the process is going to be doing a side view of him. So I'm going to round off the back of his head a little bit. I'm going to come forward like this. So this could quite possibly be the side of his head, right? So I'm going to carry this through. His eye is going to be here. His nose, if I'm going on this line right here, I'm actually going to want to get a little bit lower here. That's the top of his eye. Maybe bring his eye down to here, right? And then his nose. In the side view, I can determine how far I want that nose to kind of stick out, right? And I can go in here. I can go Command plus. Sorry, Apple plus. I can get in here a little bit and really use my brackets to get a little smaller brush. Erase some of this. I could get in here and I could delineate this a little bit more. I could slide over to here. Be like, okay, I'm going to round off that nose a little bit like this. Bring it down like this. There's the nostril. Boom. His mustache is going to come over to here. I'm going to build that mustache into there, and maybe a little bit of a lip there. The bottom of his chin is going to be down here, right? And then there's eye, and then his eyebrow is going to kind of come up like that. And then I'm going to go Apple minus. I'm going to get a little bit farther out. Kind of liking the look of that. Now his head is going to be forward of his body a little bit. So I might want to bring that body down into here. Round the back off depending on how much. There's the bottom right there. There's kind of his waist is kind of in there. I'm going to bring his legs forward a little bit. Basically his weight is distributed here. So if I brought his legs back here, he'd fall over. So I need to think a little bit about having a nice line of action that goes all the way down here. I could even bring him in here. I could have him have a weak little chest right here and have him have a little paunch right here if I want. I'm going to keep him a little bit simple. I want to try and animate him, so I want to not have too complex of a shape, right? So here's his heels are going to be there, and then his foot can come forward. He's got kind of boom, and I could come in here. I could get that a little bit there, and I'm going to depending on how much I wanted that. His arm is going to be here. I don't necessarily want to put his arm on the side here because there's going to be quite a bit of detail going on here. I don't necessarily want to cloud that all up. So what I can do is I can bring his arm over here. And now I'm kind of referencing this, comes all the way down here. So I like to grab this. So there's his shoulder. It's basically coming off there. There's the bottom of his coat jacket, and then his hand. And we'll delve into hands a little bit later on in like the next one. That's a really bad hand. So you always make mistakes. Nice thing about erasers and computer programs is you can always fix them. So he's going to have, I'm not going to deal too much with the hand right now. So half of his head, I'm going to divide his head in half again. So his ear is going to be back from that line right there. I might even push it back slightly like this. So his ear is going to be in line with the eye. If you take your hand and look at this little notch in your ear, where your ear attaches to your face, you take that line, go straight over. That's usually the top of your eye, or your eye line, actually kind of the middle of your eye. So your ear lines up almost exactly with your eye like that, right? So, and I'm seeing on my front where it kind of comes forward and that hair kind of hits him right above the ear. So I'm gonna kind of reproduce that. It's gonna come back like that, and then this is all his hair. So you can be very mathematical about this. You can take a look. That's what basically what this exercise is, and then you can see at the middle of his head right here, the hair is down to about here. So I'm gonna have to bring that hair down to about there, and so his hair is up like that, right? I'm gonna erase a little bit of that. It looks a little bit wonky there with his eyebrow. I can even have that come back a little bit like that. Okay, so there he is right there. So now I've got this. Here's the lapel again. Is going to kind of come forward. Boom. So this is his shirt in here, and then his lapel might kind of come forward and do that, like that, right? So again, this is very rough. So now this is obviously the side, right? I could come in here and be like, okay, I'm going to shave a little bit of this off. So I can come in here and obviously fine tune as much as I want. But again, this is just kind of a rough. He's looking like he's lining up. I can get back a little bit here and be like, okay, cool, that's looking pretty good like that, right? I'm going to go back in and I'm going to do a 3/4. I'm just going to get out so I can see all three. So my 3/4 is going to be on this side. I'm going to abide by the same rules I did on the front and the side, where I'm kind of following those lines. So I'm going to go here. I'm just going to kind of build that block again of his head, right? I'm going to want to have his body kind of favored over to the right hand side here. All right, I'm basically switching that body. The body goes from the front view is basically like this. The side view is fairly thin of the body right here. So I'm going to kind of cut that distance in half for his 3/4. Still comes down here. His body ends here. His waist is going to be here, right? Now instead of having the tie in the front, the tie is here, right? In the side, obviously the tie is there. I'm going to have the tie pushed over into that 3/4, and as we can maybe explore a little bit later in another video, as you take something and you go into a 3/4, and this is going to be the 3/4, you're going to kind of I cannot write. You're going to have to favor the outside. Right, so what I'm going to do is I'm not necessarily going to cut the distance directly in between here and the side. I'm going to kind of push it out to the side a little bit. I'm going to push it this way so that midline goes out a little bit more. It's kind of subtle, but we can explore it a little bit later in another video. So then I've got the lapel coming down here, got the lapel coming down here. Boom. I know that this arm is probably going to be there. I might want to push this in a little bit here. I like that kind of outside. Again, it's going to be 3/4 here. This is going to be the front of his face. Again, we're going to push that out a little bit to the left. right there, right? So then this point lines up with his eye, and it's a little bit right of mid-center. So I'm going to start that about there. I'm going to go there. That'll also help guide me down here to this eye. I want that a little bit lower right here. I'm thinking about the nose here, and I'm thinking about that other eye kind of right there. That's looking pretty good. Then I'm going to have this right here is going to be, I'm basically taking this line and extending it down here. This is going to be his ear, right? His ear's here. His ear is going to be here. So then this hair is going to come down here. I'm going to fill in the rest of it. It's fairly technical, and I know I'm going through this fairly quickly, but we'll do more of it later. Boom, boom. I'm going to erase some of that. So his eye is kind of extending out over. I want to make sure that nose, boom, boom, here, mustache goes to there. Boom. That's all looking pretty good. Looks like his chin got a little away from me there. I'm going to extend that chin. There, there. Down like that. Okay, that's looking all right. As far as the 3/4 is concerned, bring his hair up like that. And then, so now you got the legs, right? So the legs kind of come down here. So I'm going to put this leg in. It's going to be there about the same width, right? Extended from his body there. This one is going to come down here, extended about here, right? So now these could overlap. I could push these a little bit and bring this here. Could overlap like that. I'm going to try and keep this fairly accurate. So I want to have that front leg be about like that. Maybe that leg is about like that, right? Now, so as he turns around, right, this is my 1-point perspective coming back from here. So now this foot's going to have to be here, coming back from this perspective. That foot's going to have to be there, right? Like I said, I could push it a little bit more where I'm like this. Oops. Where I'm like, like this, and I could push that overlap just slightly, and I might do that just because it's a little bit more pleasing to the eye. Boom, he's got this. I could bring this leg up a little bit, so I'm kind of coming up in this rotation around here, right? You want to watch your perspective in situations like this because it can kind of get away from you, and it can really wonk you out and kind of trick you a little bit. So I'm going to go here, boom. And now this arm, if he's going to have that kind of extended out, this elbow basically comes and hits him midway in between his neck and his waist. So midway between his neck and his waist, that's going to be his elbow. Comes out here. I'm going to need to have this. And then his hand is going to flow out from that. Same thing on this. I could have this maybe kind of come out a little bit like this. Right? Again, midway right there. And then he's got that. So I've basically got, I don't like that 3/4 leg right there. So I'm going to go in there and I'm going to change that a little bit. So I've got his waist and I've got end of his body. Those are his hips right there. So I'm going to bring this forward. It looked pretty straight in there, so I'm going to continue on with that kind of straight and then straight like that. And then I've still got that. He's got kind of dinky little feet. I've designed him to have like almost no feet, dinky little feet or no feet. But again, you know, I could rethink that a little bit, revisit that, and see if that's something I want to kind of try and change. So that's a 3/4. I might want to work on that 3/4 slightly. I'm going to bring this forward here. I'm going to bring the lapel in like that. This comes here. I'm going to see that lapel right there. And again, this is all very, very rough, so we can go into kind of cleaning this up a little bit later on. But I'm at about 20 minutes right now, so that should probably do it. Here's my 3/4 is here. All right, where this is the tie here. Like this. So this is my my front here. I don't know why I'm Xing it out. This is my front, my side, and my 3/4. When I do character designs, that's kind of how I kind of concept them to begin with. Start out with the front where I'm thinking more designy. right? Taking what my character is going to be, how he's going to look, what the proportions of it are. Then I do the side view here, so I get a little bit better indication of how he looks from the side. And then the 3/4 is kind of arguably the most important pose of them all, because most of your posing, when you get to animation or when you get to more kind of illustrative work, is going to be what most of your posing is going to want to be in 3/4. You can see it's got a little bit more perspective to it. These two, this one and this one, have a tendency to look a little bit flat. So for most of your posing and most of your work, you're probably going to want to try and keep in the 3/4 view. But this is how you design characters specifically for animation, but for any medium. That's great. So again, this is the front side 3/4 character build. This is my little guy. I haven't come up with a name for him yet, but hopefully I will shortly. And next up is probably going to be designing a little bit more, refining his face or his hands or his body. So stay tuned for the next one, and thanks for listening.